Superman is the infallible, perfect golden boy of the DC Comics world. He's basically perfect, but being humans, we all love to see what happens when the perfect is made imperfect. When the good becomes bad. That's why today on Top 10 Nerd, we are talking about the top 10 scariest alternate versions of Superman. Coming in at number 10 today is Milkman Man. The DC Universe Wiki says that Milkman Man is an imperfect copy of Superman, but with all that calcium, I gotta assume he has the strongest bones that you and I have ever seen. In JLA/Doom Patrol Special, The Milk Wars, the Doom Patrol has discovered that an interdimensional corporation called Retco has been stealing stories, reconfiguring them, and repackaging them for new markets. Retco has embedded itself into the current continuity, using the radioactive milk of psychic cows to quell the more dangerous impulses of the Justice League and turn them into heroes that are safe for the masses. That is literally the quote from the official summary, I am not even joking. Milkman Man specifically has all the same powers as the famous Kryptonian superhero, only he's a milkman and central part of the Community League of Rhode Island. Now, this group is actually a very sinister collection of pleasant-spoken normal folks. I know this doesn't sound scary, necessarily, but it's just like unsettling, like Twilight Zone style. Please do yourself the favor of reading this story and trying to figure out what the heck is going on, because it took me like a hot minute. Number 9, Red Sun Superman. Instead of landing in America, Red Sun Superman landed in the Soviet Union, and that allowed the Soviets to weaponize him instead of allowing him to live the quote normal life he traditionally has in the US. He received severe training that not even the original Superman underwent, as Red Sun Superman was always meant to be a weapon. This allowed him to become quite strong as he paired his severe training with his new communist sense of duty. If the training he underwent wasn't enough to prove this power though, Superman advanced the Soviet Union to almost worldwide control without resorting to war, and he virtually eliminated poverty and disease. While this sounds pretty great, it was supported by some pretty awful tactics behind closed doors by Superman himself, but also those who worked under him. This powerful version of Superman is a much more skilled Superman, if not slightly more ruthless, as that's what he was raised to be. But it was his ability to eventually realize the fault in his own actions and allow the world to become a utopia that kind of puts him a cut above everyone else, which is why he is at number 9 today. But he did turn people into mindless cyborg zombies, so he's a little terrifying. Number 8, Earth 17 Superman. On Earth 17, superheroes are a product of government experiments. The Superman of this universe, who was called Overman, was the first hero, with the other heroes being spawns of his DNA. Now this may be weird, but that ain't the weird part. He also doesn't seem horrifying at all yet, does he? Well, after contracting a certain kind of physically transmitted disease from another person, like that kind of disease, if you know what I'm saying, he ends up going insane and destroys the Justice League and reduces his entire world to rubble. He then gets his filthy paws on a doomsday device that he intends to use on Earth 17 to completely wipe it out. The Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed this reality, just like DC tried to destroy such a naughty Superman story, even having different iterations of Overman, who we will be talking about in just a moment. But the internet never forgets DC Comics, and people like me exist to remind everyone of the things you published into this world, like naughty Superman contracting naughty diseases and reducing the world to ash. Ick. Number 7, ERADICATOR LOIS. For this point, we are going back in time to the infamous death of Superman's story. When Superman fell in the fight between himself and Doomsday, it didn't hit anyone as hard as it hit Lois Lane. Well, in the dark multiverse, something curious happened. After some time passed and Lois saw the effects of a Superman-less world, she eventually traveled to the Fortress of Solitude to return Superman's cape. What she never expected was for the Kryptonian ERADICATOR to show up. This defender of Krypton is the reason that Superman does eventually come back to life in the real world, placing Clark in the Kryptonian life matrix that was supposed to revive Superman. In this story though, it takes longer than expected, and so, assuming that the revival was a failure, the ERADICATOR instead places the powers of Superman into the body of Lois Lane. Unfortunately, this is the dark multiverse though, and so this newly superpowered Lois Lane throws almost all caution to the wayside and uses her powers recklessly. Saving the day, sure, but with no regard for collateral damage or repercussions. She ends wars, feeds the hungry, destroys the military-industrial complex, all that good stuff, but she also wipes out countless lives, including Batman's, Lex Luthor's, and she's even responsible for the fall of Superman when he does finally return. The whole story is super tragic, but that also makes it one of the best to come out of the dark multiverse, in my opinion. Number 6, Overman. I told you we would talk about another Overman. This version of our favorite red and blue boy didn't end up in Kansas when he was ejected from Krypton. No, this Kal-El found himself in Sudetenland, Germany in 1938, and he was acquired by a certain mustached fascist. With Kal and Kryptonian tech, the Reich were obviously able to win World War II and rule over the entire planet. Later, Overman would become disgusted with the stashed man when his annihilation of those he deemed lesser had been finalized. Although Superman still served that man's political party. Weird set of morals there, I don't know. Eventually though, he was cloned and received a romantic partner in the form of Overgirl. But after her passing, he was completely heartbroken and he supplied information to the freedom fighters who long opposed the fascists, which eventually led to the end of the new Reichman, this world's evil Justice League, and the city of Metropolis. With the grief of all those losses holding him down, he was overthrown by his own best friend. But I wouldn't feel too bad for him though, he was pretty bad. Number 5, Ultraman. Who would have thought that a Superman who is just a giant man baby would be one of the more powerful versions of the character? Ultraman is the Superman of Earth 3, where strength and power are held above everything else, even good and righteousness. Ultraman was born on the dying Krypton to Jor-El, who was able to secure a life pod for his incredibly powerful son, who he saw as his best chance of revenge. While in his life pod, Kal-El was given the ideology of becoming the strongest possible being, eschewing all weakness in himself and in others. His rocket crash landed in Smallville, right through the home of the dysfunctional couple Johnny and Martha Kent, who he forced to be his parents until he was 7 years old, when he then took their lives and burned their home to the ground. He took the name Ultraman, took over the Earth, and created the crime syndicate of America. Unlike Superman, Ultraman actually gets more powerful from kryptonite, and the sun is what makes him weaker, which is fine because he will literally just move the moon to block out the sun. Number 4, Brutal. Brutal is a cloned version of Superman, but unlike a certain bizarre version of Superman, this duplication was done by none other than Darkseid himself. Darkseid raised the resulting clone into a weapon and unleashed him on the superheroes of Earth 2, along with Steppenwolf and the other Hunger Dogs. Now when Steppenwolf tried to subvert his master Darkseid and take Earth as his own, Brutal ruthlessly, or some might say brutally, takes Steppenwolf from this plane of existence with his heat vision, establishing his devotion to his Lord Darkseid, being all like, "Let me make my intentions clear. Hail Darkseid," which is just a sweet line after you take down a general of Darkseid. Now the Earth became lost to Darkseid's minions, and eventually, after a lot of other stuff, Kal-Zod, Earth 2's really awesome Superman, faced Brutal in combat, and after a furious battle, showed that Brutal was just an imitation, and a cheap one at that, as his body began to deteriorate, all Spider-Man clone degradation style, and the day was finally saved. Number 3, Injustice Superman. The Superman of the Injustice universe has pretty much the same history as the baseline Superman, but when the Joker kidnaps the pregnant Lois Lane, it lures Superman into a trap of fear gas. In this fear-induced state, Superman hallucinates his wife as the villain Doomsday and instantly attacks, flying Lois and what would have been John Kent into space, taking their lives, and also inadvertently causing a nuclear detonation to destroy his city, Metropolis. After suddenly losing his city, wife, and his baby, Superman goes into a pretty honestly understandable rage, bursting into the interrogation room where Batman is learning the true intentions of the Joker, and he plunges his super fist straight through the clown's chest. Following these events, Superman takes control of the Earth and rules it as a tyrant. He turns on and destroys his friends, is manipulated by Wonder Woman, holds nothing back, and puts the entire Earth under the control of his regime. He is a seriously hardcore version of Superman who has actually been revisited recently in John Kent's comic book story, where he even took the life of Earth 3's Ultraman pretty easily. It was kinda nuts. Number 2, SUPERDOOM. On Earth 45, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Clark Kent are scientists instead of reporters, and they use their smarts to build a machine that can turn thoughts into reality. Which, I gotta be honest, how the heck did they think that was a good idea? I can think of 10 things right now off the top of my head that should never become reality. Anyways, using the aforementioned thought to form machine, they tried to create a being called Superman, who would be capable of doing amazing things and who could save worlds. But when they are forced to give their idea over to Overcorp, these guys decide to rebrand and end up creating a monstrosity. Superman, the Last Night of Tomorrow, or as he's better known to everyone else, SUPERDOOM. With a corporate-fueled agenda of destroying all competition, SUPERDOOM quickly becomes the strongest super being on its own planet, and then entered into the bleed space to take out all the other versions of Superman across the multiverse. Of course, bad guys never win forever, so after defeating and devouring multiple different Supermen of multiple different Earths, he was stopped by the Superman and Lex Luthor of Earth 22, who stranded him between universes. He's since been used in a few other storylines and remains one of the most formidable evil versions of Superman to this day because he didn't actually pass away. He's still out there, just like between universes. Crazy. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Bump in the Night. For starters, DC's House of Horror is basically a collection of short stories featuring different characters. They are all equally interesting and horror themed. The Possession of Billy Batson and the Last Laugh stories are particularly interesting, but for today's video, I think we want to talk about the very first one, Bump in the Night. This short story follows Martha Kent on the night Kal-El arrives on Earth. Jonathan Kent has gone out to explore what exactly caused a big bang and trail of smoke on the Kent's farm, but he doesn't come back. As Martha worries about where her husband has gone to, she goes back inside, but Martha starts hearing bumping and thumping coming from upstairs in the house. All of a sudden, a demonic humanoid child crashes through the ceiling and begins attacking her. She tries to run to the barn, but fiery beams of energy fire from the creature, blowing up the barn. She takes refuge in her truck only for the creature to land on the hood, shrieking. It throws the truck across the yard and Martha gets out wounded only for the truck to explode. The tiny little creature then flies away with the symbol of an S emblazoned on its own chest. And that's all we got today. Thank you guys so much for watching on Top 10 Nerd. As usual, I will catch you guys on the flippy flop, but until then, keep it real and peace out, nerds.